good evening, everyone in Alberta, Canada, and beyond. It is Wednesday, July 31st, 2024, and I'm Kerry Lambert, and I welcome you to an evening of solutions for a new Alberta brought to you by the Alberta Prosperity Project, also known as APP. APP's purpose is to educate, inspire, and unite all Albertans, businesses, and organizations to protect the prosperity, individual freedoms, rights, and self-determination by empowering the Alberta government to restructure Alberta's relationship within or without Canada. And if you can, please share this webinar. We are on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Rumble. As well as after this live, we're also on other video and audio sites like Apple, Spotify, BitChute, Vimeo, etc. under the Alberta Prosperity Project banner, as well as under the Chris and Kerry Show. I'd like to just show the website that we often will talk about, the Alberta Prosperity Project website, albertaprosperityproject.com. You can go there, find out more what we're doing. APP memberships are 1 year for $20, 2 years for $30, 3 years for €40. You can obviously make a donation there. The last few months, we've been talking about our Support 5 initiative. You can go under the Support Us on the website and learn a little bit more. It's really about taking 5 minutes a week on social media, liking, sharing, and commenting on our posts. We're asking people to recruit 5 new supporters monthly. Of course, that grows our community strength and reach and network. And to also do a $5 monthly donation, if it's available for you, to fuel our initiatives, empowering us to plan effectively and push forward toward our goals. And we now have another initiative. I love this initiative. We're just going to go back here, back to the page. It's now called Take 5. And if you click on the Take 5, it'll give you a little bit more about it. It's very similar. We do ask you to for a donation for $5 a month if you're able to do that. But it's also asking you to make a video on why you love Alberta. And with that, I'm going to show Tanya. Tanya Clemens is taking, kind of in partnership with a lot of people doing the social media now. And so she came up with this idea a little while ago, and we really loved it. And now we're going full bore on it. So I'm going to push this on. Hopefully you guys can hear it and see it. And if you haven't, you probably got it in your email this week, but this is Tanya.
Hey there, Alberta. It's Tanya speaking, and I am beyond thrilled to kickstart the Take 5 Alberta initiative alongside the Alberta Prosperity Project. We need your vibrant spirit to join us and share your vision for our future, one that is focused on sovereignty, prosperity, and the ability to decide our own path without interference from the federal government. So, what does a sovereign and prosperous Alberta mean to you? How would this vision bring positive changes to your life, your loved ones, and to your community? Take a moment to envision the Alberta of your dreams, and let's voice these dreams loud and clear. All you have to do is grab your phone, find a spot that screams Alberta, and take 5 to tell your story. Share what sovereignty and prosperity represent to you, or paint a picture of how you see Alberta's future. It's as simple as that. Once you've recorded your video, it's time to post it using the hashtag Take5forAlberta. Each and every voice matters, and your words have the power to inspire and ignite our community to think big and take bold actions. But we don't want to stop there. Head over to albertaprosperityproject.com, click on support, and give 5, just $5 a month to help fuel our mission. Together, we can successfully fund the future of Alberta, turning it into a shining beacon of prosperity and self-determination. Make sure to dive into the conversation at albertaprosperityproject.com and explore how you can make a meaningful difference. Let's come together, join forces, and take action to secure Alberta's prosperity and sovereignty. So don't wait around. Take 5 to create your video and give 5 to share our future. This is your moment. Let's make every second count.
So once again, that's our new initiative, Take 5 for Alberta. And you can do hashtags, hashtag Take 5 for Alberta, hashtag Alberta Prosperity Project, and hashtag Alberta Strong. Those are the 3 hashtags that we do use pretty much exclusively whenever we're posting stuff for Alberta Prosperity Project. And so the big question is, how do I make a video? Well, maybe that's the topic for next week's webinar. because I know it can be daunting, and Tanya did an amazing job on that. And a lot of these templates are out there already on TikTok or even on Instagram. And so I may do a quick little thing. I haven't even done a take 5 yet. So once I do that, I will document what I'm doing, show it to you guys, and then everyone should be able to do it. It really is an easy thing to do. It's just, I don't seem to have 5 minutes, and neither do our guests that are coming. They don't have 5 minutes either. Tonight's episode is called The Alberta Bill of Rights Revisited, and we have Leighton Gray, who is senior partner at Gray Wilkins Spencer. And in 2024, Leighton was named one of Canada's top 50 lawyers. Amazing. Congratulations there, buddy. He's also on the committee revising the Alberta Bill of Rights, so we'll have a bit of a history lesson with that. And he's the host of the Grey Matter podcast, and he's launched the vaccine mandate class action lawsuit, which I know he will talk more about tonight too. And of course, we're happy to have pulled our other guest out of the kitchen at the Whistle Stop Cafe in Mirror, Alberta to join us. That is, of course, none other than our good friend and freedom advocate, Christopher Scott. This is a live webinar, so if you'd like to make comments or ask questions, please put 3 question marks before your question so I can flag it, and we'll definitely give our best try to answer that. And don't forget, please share, and get the word out on what we're doing. And with that, I'm going to bring the boys on right now. We have Mr. Leighton Gray and Mr. Christopher Scott. How are you, gentlemen?
Fantastic.
Excellent.
Well.
Is it warm enough for you guys? It's only warm for 2 weeks in Alberta, although it now seems to be about 3 weeks. So hopefully it's all working out well for you guys.
I haven't been spending much time in the house here. I've been staying in the trailer because there's AC there.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I didn't think about that when I accepted the invite to the webinar. It's about 35 degrees in here. It's a little toasty.
You probably could have brought your computer out into the trailer, couldn't you?
Or on the front lawn, whatever.
And of course, Leighton is in Italy. It looks like you're in Italy.
No, that is all virtual. I am, however,
It's all virtual. Yeah, exactly.
I'm enjoying the climate boiling, and for as long as it lasts, till we all, of course, go up and we all
That's
immolate
great.
and go up in smoke. But yeah, so we keep paying you carbon tax, folks, because it's going to fix everything.
Oh, exactly.
That's what I hear.
I like the sarcasm already. So, of course, we're talking about the Bill of Rights today, and our premier has been going around Alberta already. I don't know how many events she's done. I was at the one-on-one yesterday with Daniel Smith here in Calgary, and lots of great questions were asked, lots of really insightful and, dare I say, putting her on the spot types of questions. Yeah. And I think you can probably find out more if you do look under the Calgary Lougheed UCP. I know they put the board on with Daryl Kummick and Eric Bouchard, and what a great event that was. But this was a topic that was definitely brought up, was about the Bill of Rights, and it had to do with some questions about property rights. It had questions to do with vaccine mandates, etc., which made perfect sense timing wise to have Leighton on to talk a little bit more about that. And before we actually get into that, I know there's a lot of our viewers may not really know that Alberta even has a Bill of Rights, and how it came in. But we, for the most part, all we've talked about for the last couple of years has been the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And so, Leighton, maybe that's how we can start, is just kind of saying what both are, why they both came into being, and what we can do with the Bill of Rights. And of course, the ultimate question is, so what is being changed in, what's being revised?
Yeah, so when we're talking about rights, we actually have to go back quite a bit further into history to understand something about our country and our province. And that is that it's a recent thing. I know you've had Michael Wagner, I'm sure, on your show. Yep. He explains this very well in his books. But our Constitution, our small c Constitution, is actually a much broader concept than just the Constitution Act, or what used to be called the BNA Act, and the Charter. It goes all the way back, really 1,000 years of history. And even longer, but certainly about 1,000 years of history, trace it all the way back to, say, the Magna Carta. in England. And then throughout the history of British law, there were developed certain individual rights and freedoms, and a lot of it had to do with developing concepts like the supremacy of Parliament versus the divine right of kings. And in the 17th century, they had a very tumultuous period of English history that looks a lot like what we're living through right now. In the 17th century, they had a king, Charles I, who was beheaded because he usurped Parliament and he was denying people's freedoms. He was denying the will of the people and starting foreign wars. He lost his head, and then they had a period of theocracy under Oliver Cromwell, and then they had something called the Glorious Revolution, which resulted in something called the Bill of Rights, the 1688 English Bill of Rights, which is still part of English law, and it's also part of Alberta law. And it contains, for example, a guarantee of the right to keep and bear arms. So that's actually part of Canadian constitutional law already. But the problem that is was occurred in Canada, and this is mostly due to the Supreme Court, is it has treated the 1982 as sort of the starting point for Canadian constitutional law. And it's treated the Charter as the be all and end all. And of course, that's been a huge problem. Meanwhile, every province in Canada has its own provincial Bill of Rights, including Alberta. Back in 1971, the first thing that Premier Leahy did when his Conservative Party came to power, the first bill that he enacted was actually the Alberta Bill of Rights, and it hasn't been changed since, not to any large degree. So the Bill of Rights we have right now, which is being used by the Alberta Human Rights Commission to decide cases of human rights allegations, it's over 50 years old. It's in need of revision. It predates a lot of significant social changes that have happened.
That's right.
Since then. The big one, and this is a big one, and it's important to back up a step here and say, during COVID, the Charter and our bills of rights, our rights charters, provincial ones, really let people like Chris down because they were in situations where their rights were being violated significantly without any recourse. A big one that has been a huge problem in Alberta and really throughout the country in the arena of vaccine mandates is that there is no guarantee presently of individual bodily autonomy in the Alberta Human Rights Act, and nor is there anything like that in the Charter. So when many Albertans were put out of work because they would not comply with vaccine mandates, and they made human rights complaints to the Alberta Human Rights Commission, they were told, sorry, you're SOL because what you're complaining about is not a guaranteed right and freedom under Alberta law or Canadian law. So it's very clear that this law is in need of renovation. It's in need of change. It's something that we recognized actually in the Alberta Prosperity Project very early on. And kind of the genesis of this for me, and the way that I got involved in it is going back over 2 years. Jeff Rath and myself started working on a new constitution for Alberta, and so I did a lot of research, and that led me to the viewpoint that if you look at what America did, that the process was they did their declaration first in 1776. They got their Bill of Rights in 1787, and their constitution came last in 1791. The idea is that if you start with the Bill of Rights and you figure out what to protect in a society, and then you just leave whatever's left over for a quote unquote limited government, that's a pretty good way to set up a country. And it was very good in the United States and Canada for a long time, but we've entered an era right now, and this is the crux of the rights discussion. And the reason why we need to make these changes now is because in the West, in countries like the United States and Canada, government has become so big and so powerful and so rich that it's overreaching into every aspect of our lives. Absolutely. And so this new Bill of Rights is aimed at providing protections for Albertans against federal government overreach. And so it really is part of the whole sovereignty project that the Smith government is so committed to. So that's a bit of a snapshot of the Alberta Bill of Rights, what it is, and why this bill is being presented at this time.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you this quick. So we've had a Bill of Rights since 1972, and there's a few people out there who accuse me of being a government plant because I based my my lawyers filed it was a constitutional challenge, a charter challenge for my issues. If we have this already, and it should prevent the things that happen to business owners like me from happening, what value did it have?
Well, this is an excellent question. When you go back to the beginning of the charter, and again, I mentioned Michael Wagner's book, actually a couple of them, but one of them is called Leaving God Behind. And in that book, he explains, I think, very succinctly, and really in a way that can't be disputed, that the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms was never really intended to create or to protect our freedoms. In fact, Canadians were more free and our rights were better protected before the Charter. The real purpose of the Charter, which has been quite successful, is to secularize the Canadian state and also to silently transfer power from the legislature, from Parliament, from our elected legislatures, and therefore from the people who elect our members, to essentially 9 unelected elitist judges and other judges in Canada who are, for the most part, appointed by the Prime Minister. And so what's happened with the Charter, and a huge part of the problem with the Charter is that the way these quote unquote rights and freedoms are phrased is overly vague. And so it gives a lot of room for judicial interpretation. And what has happened over the past 40 years is that increasingly our courts, especially our Supreme Court, has read down and limited those individual rights and freedoms, the ones that are listed there. Things like freedom of religion, freedom of expression, freedom of association, right to life, liberty, and security of the person, the right to protection from unreasonable search and seizure, the right against arbitrary detention. These have been read down in favor of expanding the scope and the extent of government power. And so it's to the point where Beverly McLaughlin, who is the longest serving Chief Justice in the history of the Canadian Supreme Court, said during actually in the aftermath of the quelling of the terrible insurrection that happened in Ottawa in 2022. I'm speaking, of course, of the truckers' convoy. She said in an op-ed that essentially Section 1 of the Charter is the only effective section in the Charter. That really the only effective section is Section 1, which says that the government can do anything it wants to, so long as it can be justified in a free and democratic society, demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. And of course, the limits of that have been stretched, a lot further than the waistband on Mr. Nenchi's pants. I hope he's listening. But the problem, that's the problem essentially with the Charter, is that, yes, we have these rights, they're enumerated, they're listed there, but our courts are very committed and have been committed to a political agenda to reduce their significance and by the same token, to expand the power of government. And this is exactly what we saw during COVID. We've had a few notable exceptions. Everybody's heard about the Mosley decision. By the way, the federal government has reacted to that by recently passing a law which says that there can be no inquiry like the National Citizens Inquiry. There can be no royal commission conducted into how the federal government handled the COVID-19 pandemic.
Wow.
So that's a bill that Mr. Poilievre, or if we do get another prime minister in Canada, will have to repeal. So this is essentially the problem, is we have a federal government that's very brazen. And the reason why is because they know that the Charter is ineffective, not only because of the way it's worded, but more importantly, because of the very politicized way in which it is being interpreted and applied by judges. And this is something that the new Bill of Rights and some of the other suggestions that we've made to the Smith government about how to restrict judicial discretion, so that judges don't operate as unelected lawmakers in our country. There are other ways to restrict the power of judges, but the new Bill of Rights in Alberta is designed to be something of a bulwark against government overreach, in the context of the notwithstanding clause, which of course empowers and it gives provinces the ability to opt out of Supreme Court of Canada decisions, surrounding constitutional interpretation. That's something that I think that the Smith government is going to have to look at very, very seriously. Of course, Quebec has done it. They've made honestly a daily habit of it, almost, of opting out of the Charter and Supreme Court of Canada decisions on things like language rights and others. But that's something that I think going forward, I think the Smith government is going to have to be more and more prepared to do. That is, if the Trudeau government sticks around, and pray God they won't, and also if they continue to encroach upon individual rights and freedoms.
I find it a little bit troubling that Premier Smith has said that we're going to fight as hard as we can and get all the sovereignty we can, but Alberta will respect the decisions of the Supreme Court. Yeah. It doesn't sound like there's a lot of appetite there to challenge. Now, maybe that'll change, and I hope it does. But the other question I had here, Leighton, more specifically, is if we already have a Bill of Rights in Alberta, and I've read it. Of course, I was going through this stuff trying to fight for my survival, so I was forced to find out where exactly I fit in all this. If you take that at face value, the government wasn't allowed to do what they did. I think it even specifically says that they can do things if they prove in court first that it's appropriate. But if we already had that, why wasn't it effective in preventing the overreach that we saw that was declared illegal through Ingram?
Well, part of the problem is that what's happened in Canada, and this includes Alberta, is that you actually cannot sue your government in court over human rights violations. They've set up something called the Human Rights Commission. There's the Canadian Human Rights Commission, which is going to be enforcing this new bill C-63 that you've probably heard a lot about. They're going to become the arbiters of hate speech in this country, and this is already happening. But if you have a complaint, for example, against an employer or against the RCMP because, I don't know, they come and they lock up and shut down your restaurant in some rural community in Alberta near Red Deer, you can't go to court and claim a human rights violation. You have to complain to the Alberta Human Rights Commission. Well, the Alberta Human Rights Commission is actually under the auspices of the Ministry of Justice. And it's populated by lawyers and adjudicators who are appointed, they're government appointees. A lot of the people who were populating the Alberta Human Rights Commission during COVID were actually Rachel Notley appointees. And so a lot of them are very left-leaning. And so this is a serious problem because you're applying to bureaucrats who are answerable to the Minister of Justice. Well, so you're complaining to the Alberta Human Rights Commission about a government that's violating your rights, but the Human Rights Commission is under the supervision of the very government that you're complaining about. So you've got a serious problem here. And this is one of the things that we've recommended, and that is, I think, there's different phases to this. This bill is sort of step one. I think we also have to develop a new constitution for Alberta, and I think we have to completely redesign the whole concept of how the Alberta Human Rights Commission operates, because presently it is, in my opinion, it's an administrative arm of the executive state. And there are very, very, very few people that I know of who have had any success in the COVID era complaining to the Alberta Human Rights Commission about harms that they suffered during COVID due to government violation of their rights. In fact, the Alberta Human Rights Commission actually has the authority to exercise discretion to simply not even hear your case and dismiss it out of hand because they think that your rights aren't violated. Now, if you want to appeal that starts to become a very expensive process, ergo the problem. Yeah. So to answer your question, Chris, the new Bill of Rights It's designed to address some of those endemic problems, but it's also aimed at enumerating and updating the Bill of Rights so that it reflects more accurately the state of Alberta society, in 2024 versus 1971. As you know, I mean, a lot of things have changed.
Yeah,
there's a big part missing there, though. I mean, we can put all of these things in place and all of these, these legal mechanisms in place that are supposed to affirm and protect our rights, but we can't defend them. And that's a big problem in this country. The only way we could ever defend our rights against government is through independence. In the United States, it's a constitutionally protected item. Is you're supposed to be able to defend yourself against tyrannical government. It's enshrined in their constitution. We don't have that. So I fear that, we go to all this work, which we should be doing, and if we don't pursue independence and get ourselves to a point where we are, at very least equal to our government, nothing matters if we can't defend it.
Well, and even a lot of the court cases that are going on right now that we're following, it seems to be that they're dragging on and they're going on forever. And if you're paying for a lawyer on your own, there's no possible way that you have enough money. But the government basically has an unending supply of money. So
in Montana, a few years back, I guess it was almost 20 years now, the federal government was going to annex a rancher's land. And he said, no, you're not. That's illegal. And the government said, yes, we are. And he said, okay, well, you can try. The government showed up with their agents to clear him off his land. And he was sitting there with his friends and they were armed, protecting themselves against the government. Now in Canada, people hear that and it's like, oh my goodness, how dare you? You couldn't possibly do that. Well, if somebody's coming to take your property and they're coming to threaten your livelihood and threaten your family, you should be able to defend. And he defended. Now, nobody was injured. They just backed off. It ended up at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court actually commended him for exercising his constitutionally protected right to defend himself against the government. And he won. But if that had been Canada, the government would have gone in. It's completely illegal in Canada to defend yourself against the government. You have to submit. You have to accept that this is happening and then go to court afterwards and try and fight with no resources against an adversary that has unlimited resources. And like you said, Kerry, you fight and you fight and you fight in court. And Leighton, you've seen this time and time again. And it usually ends with somebody exhausting their reserves. Yeah. And that's why they lose. Not because the law is against them. It's because they can't exercise their right to engage in the legal process.
Are you speaking specifically about the right to keep and bear arms, Chris, or are you talking about something like the Castle Doctrine?
There's two parts. There's the right to keep and bear arms and the right to form a militia. In the United States, they have private militia, and it's perfectly legal. It's constitutional. It's encouraged, and that's the people that are they're the line that the government has to cross. And it sounds like, as a Canadian, even just saying those things, it sounds so foreign and so out there to me. But the reality is, if you don't have an ability to enforce and protect your rights, what good are those rights anyway?
We actually did include the right to keep and bear arms in the submission that we made to the Alberta government. And part of the argument is that it's already part of Canadian constitutional law because it's in the 1688 Bill of Rights. The English actually had it. Everybody thinks of the Americans coming up with this, but actually it was in the 1688 Bill of Rights. And by implication, it's part of Canadian constitutional law because we inherited all those statutes from England. Of course, the federal government has been very much engaged in passing legislation aimed at gun confiscation in the guise of gun registration. This is not a new concept. I've written a paper on this, which shows that, in fact, there's no correlation, there's no cause and effect relationship between gun registration laws and reduction of gun crime. In fact, the opposite is true. as governments try to increase or restrict gun ownership. Actually, gun ownership increases. And more importantly, gun confiscation has been a hallmark. It's been a go-to move, is particularly in the 20th century, for every single totalitarian state. This goes all the way back to the Soviet Russia, the Russian Revolution of 1917, the Nazis in the 1930s and 40s in Germany, Maoist China, Cuba, you name it. I could go on and on. Gun confiscation, gun confiscation has always been done by governments that want to restrict freedom. So you're quite right about that. I can tell you based on our consultations that we've had with government, this is a real difficult point for them. Of course, I think that the current government in Alberta, the UCP government, is. I have to be careful here. I don't want to throw rocks at them, but I think they're understandably hypersensitive to criticism from the left. Because let's face it, all the media in Canada and Alberta is controlled by the left. And so everything they do, they get attacked, whether it's good or bad or ugly. And so they're understandably concerned that if they include something like the right to keep and bear arms in this Bill of Rights, that the left is going to just haul off and open fire on them, pardon the pun. But my argument about the right to keep and bear arms, although, Chris, I quite agree with what you said about the need to protect yourself, there's actually a more subtle reason why totalitarian governments are so interested in confiscating guns. And in this argument, if people will bear with me for a moment, if you are listening to this and you are not a gun owner and you are not a gun user, you don't hunt, you should still be in favor of private gun ownership in Alberta. And here's why. What is a firearm? A firearm is a subspecies of private property. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And the reason why these governments come first for the guns is it's like their gateway. They come first for the guns, and then once they can legislate and seize one type of personal property, then they can take everything else. And bear in mind, folks, we're talking about a government that has seized bank accounts. There are many millions of dollars that were donated to the truckers' convoy that are still in escrow. Yeah. So that's what we're dealing with here. So what I said to the Alberta government is I said, look, couch the right to keep and bear arms in the context of protection of private property, because that speaks to everyone. And so, and actually, when I spoke, I actually had the pleasure of speaking to somebody from Mr. Amria's office today, somebody who's very high up on his staff. And I made the argument. I said, look, if you're not going to put this wording in there, keep and bear arms, at least have wording in there that protects private personal property, because by extension, someone like me could come along and say, well, look, Judge, you can't seize this. You can't seize, Chris's guns because they're personal property and they're private property. They're protected under the Alberta Bill of Rights. So this is something where, we're continuing to press and lobby the Alberta government. We're very hopeful that the right to keep and bear arms will be in the document. It certainly is in the document that we submitted to them. And I could tell you more about that document if you're interested. Yeah. But I quite agree with Chris. The right to keep and bear arms, for the reasons that both of us have said, is a very key component of any type of Bill of Rights. And remember also that, if you look at what the whole plan of the globalists is they want to disenfranchise us entirely. They want all of us completely dependent upon government. And of course, if we can't hold and we can't keep any of our private property, we really are defenseless but for government handouts. And so that's why this right to keep and bear arms, and by extension personal property, is so vital. If we lose that, if we don't have some guarantee of private property in this country, I think we're fully lost.
I'm going to clarify this really quickly. I want to clarify my position on this. I'm not saying at all, folks out there listening, that I want to, be violent or anything like that. That's not it at all. What I'm looking at here is, why is it that the government that works for us has all of the force under the sun and they can come for us and use it without going to court first and proving that they have to. The way it should work is if the government says, Mr. Scott, we want you to do this, or you need to do this, and I say, no, that's infringing on my rights, they shouldn't just come for me and put a chain on my building. We should go to court where these things are decided. I would have been happy to do that. Go to court, hash it out, and the law of the land decides who's right and who's wrong. But that's not how it works. And
that would have taken 6 months. For sure.
That's right. But they just come for me and they arrest me and detain me and use force to do whatever they want without ever going to court and proving that it should happen. And that's why it's so important that why are people okay with the scales being so, with the deck being so stacked against us? Why are people okay living under the thumb of a government that can literally come for you at any time? If they get a phone call and someone says, oh, your children are in danger or whatever, they'll come to your house, they'll take your children. No questions asked, and do not pass go. If someone, all sorts of things like this can happen. And it never goes to court, and the damage is done before any legal mechanisms are used.
Have Canadians become soft and complacent? Like, I'd like to know what the mentality of people were 100 years ago. If this sort of, we're going to come and take your gun away. Now, granted, different circumstance, maybe they did need it to survive and to feed, and so that was a tool. But here we are, say 100 years later, and we're so soft. We're absolutely ridiculously soft. Look at Chris. He's so soft. and I question, how can we toughen up ourselves? Because a lot of these arguments that we're talking about, we're saying, well, this happened in the US, or they have their right to bear arms, or whatever. And yet when we talk about Canadians, we always say, but excuse me, I'm sorry. Right. And is that really something that we need to get Canadians, to get Albertans a little tougher on a lot of these?
We've never done it. We've never had that opportunity. Yeah. Leighton, you mentioned the United States declaring independence. We never declared independence. No. We agreed to be ruled, but allowed to govern ourselves. Right?
Yes, and that's quite true. But you're probably aware, Chris, that this is one of the recommendations that I made to the Alberta Prosperity Project. And the reason why is because Kosovo, they declared independence. Now, I want to back up a step here, because I may be stepping on some toes here. The party line within the APP has always been to use the auspices of the Clarity Act in order to engineer Alberta's exit from Confederation. With the benefit of hindsight, I've moved away from that position. And I actually think that the Clarity Act is a trap for the unwary. I think the Clarity Act is a federal statute that was designed to prevent provinces from leaving Confederation. And so what I've recommended is that if we're serious about a free and independent and prosperous Alberta, the way to go is to declare independence from Canada, just as Kosovo did. And it's interestingly, the first UN member country in the world to recognize the independence of Kosovo was none other than Canada. So
that's right.
Canada cannot very well say to Alberta, oh no, we can't recognize your independence. Alberta is a much more developed nation and has a greater claim to sovereignty and independence as an independent state than Kosovo could ever claim. And so I think that would be the first, to my mind, that would be the first stage if we were going to go down that road. And honestly, with the way that the federal government is encroaching on Albertans and our very way of life, I don't think there's going to be any alternative. The only thing that could forestall that potentially is if Mr. Poilievre and the CPCs come to power, because I think in that situation, what would likely happen is for many Albertans, their let's say their resolve if they're soft already, the resolve is going to be softened. Because Mr. Poilievre's government is going to be kinder and gentler. It'll still be the same. It'll be a lot like it was under Harper, I think. But it still will be a raw deal for Alberta. On your question, Kerry, about are we soft? I've been doing a lot of reading and writing about the role that propaganda plays in all of this. And I'll just share with your viewers and listeners, when I was working on the Ingram case, and I was getting ready to cross-examine Dr. Hinshaw, and I actually put this to her. Alberta taxpayer dollars were spent to commission a psychological study that was aimed at actually breaking down the resistance of those people who were not willing to go and get vaccinated. And then it might shock you to learn that the 3 people on this call were fit perfectly the profile of the person who was most resistant to getting vaccination. And so the role of propaganda in all of this cannot be underestimated. I've gone back. I read some writings by a man named Edward Bernhayes, who wrote is the sort of the great granddaddy of modern propaganda. Mr. Goebbels, who was Hitler's propaganda minister, used a lot of the techniques that Bernhayes came up with. And then there's another man, a German fellow right now named Matthias Desmet, who's written an incredible book called The Psychology of Totalitarianism. And I recommend these books strongly to the people who are listening in, because it'll explain to you the scientific precision of what was done to Albertans and done to Canadians, not just through COVID, but going back even further, through the 9/11, through the mortgage crisis, through all of this, even now with the climate scare, and now with the fear that the Muslims are going to come and take us all over and behead us on Main Street. All of this culture of fear is designed to make us very, very susceptible and vulnerable to manipulation. And the manipulation is, we're going to trade our freedom for safety and security. The government is going to protect us from all of this. And of course, this only emphasizes how important individual rights and freedoms are as protections. But the real problem that we're living through right now, when you go underneath the Bill of Rights, is we've suffered really the denigration of the rule of law in this country. We have a prime minister who regards himself as a crown prince. I don't know if you guys saw this interview he did with sorry, the name of the reporter escapes me, on the beach in Tofino. Kean Vexty. Those 10 minutes or so were so revealing of the man who's running our country. He sees himself like the Shah of Iran, where he can do whatever
he works more
whatever
than
he
us.
likes.
He works more than all of us.
Yes.
He does.
Yeah,
all 3 of us.
Yeah, he's only taken off over 700 days in the 9 years he's been prime minister. But the problem is, he regards himself as above the law. He commits multiple ethical violations. Our government is gripped in scandal, and so that whittles down that lack of respect for the law whittles down the whole concept of the rule of law throughout Canada, and it's part of the reason why people can't get relief in courts. And now we have a situation where we have people defecating in our streets. It's a fundamental, exactly. It's a fundamental breakdown of the rule of law, which says that that the law applies to everybody, and we're all equal before the law, and also that our leaders are our servants. They're answerable to us, and also, and this is an APP concept, they're also answerable to God, and this is why under the APP. Well, I won't call it an ideology, but our philosophy is that we have to have God at the head of the state, and not so we can create some sort of crazy theocracy, where we have someone like a pope running our lives and telling us what to do, but so that our rulers understand that all of their power is actually delegated to them from a higher source, and so that they can't violate our rights, because our rights are not theirs to delegate and to revoke, like so much Halloween candy.
On that note, Leighton, folks, if you might be out there watching and thinking or yelling at your screen, "Oh, keep religion out of politics," blah blah blah. I want you to do me a favor. Go back on either the Whistle Stop Cafe Facebook page or the Chris and Kerry Show, and you will find a live video with Tanner Naday. Now, Tanner, he's a lay theologian, I guess you call him, a lay pastor, and he delivered a sermon on this topic. Why do we need God in politics? And even if you're an atheist or your ideology is secular, watch that. He explains it very well, how there will always be some sort of religion or church leading the government. And you really have to decide which one you want it to be, because it's either going to be the church of anti-human, which is what we're shifting towards now, or the church of love your neighbor, which is what we left in the past. So maybe just take 20 minutes and go back, find that one. I think you could, Kerry, I don't know if you know how we can search it.
Yeah, he's a brilliant guy. And just to sort of finish off that thought, some of your viewers and listeners might have heard of a very, very famous atheist named Christopher Hitchens. If you Google that name, you'll see he's written a number of books, very highly respected atheist person. But he says that even as an atheist, he prefers to live in a society that functions according to Christian principles. He calls it cultural Christianity. And what he means by that is in a Christian society, he has individual rights and freedoms. He's left alone. He has liberty. There's respect for the law. And you know what? He doesn't have to be a Christian. He doesn't have to be a Muslim. He doesn't have to be a Buddhist. He doesn't have to practice any religion. But all he wants to do is he wants to live in a society that tolerates all of these different religions and which guarantees individual rights and freedoms. And it just so happens that the only societies which have ever done that with any degree of consistency or success happen to be societies that are founded on Christian principles. There's no other society, no other way of doing things. It's like Sir Winston Churchill once famously wrote, democracy, Western democracy is the worst system ever devised, except for all the others. So, the system we have is the best of the worst.
Yeah, that's right.
But it's a complex system. And, whenever you have a complex system, if it's working well, at least half of the time, let alone most of the time, I mean, that's truly amazing. Yeah. But sorry, I don't mean to blather on. I'm just kind of, piggybacking onto Chris's point there.
Yeah.
No, we do that all the time. And I'm going to blather a little more. For those of you that want to dig a little deeper into that topic, go check out a book written by a man named Ted Byfield. It's called The Christians. So Ted, he wrote that book, and the thesis, I guess, would be that it's not a battle between liberalism and conservatism or right and left. What we're experiencing in society is a shift in direction away from God or godly values, or towards, right? That's what he said. It's when the liberal government, they basically want to say everything is permissible as long as it's your truth. And the conservative government says, well, no, there's a set of rules and a set of morals that are higher than we are, that we base our law on. And that's why we say the supremacy of God is so important. So check out that book, Ted Byfield, called The Christians. And Leighton, you were talking about the Clarity Act and how you kind of went away from that and thinking that we should just declare independence. I agree with you. And that's one of the things that we often forgot to talk about at our presentations with the Alberta Prosperity Project, because we always focus on the Clarity Act. But the reality is, the Clarity Act, we mention that because it's a federal act, so it's completely legal, and that is the path that is outlined for us by those that we wish to leave. Now, you're correct. They might tie it up in court forever. They might stall and say we can't do it, whatever. And you're right. At that point, if the Alberta government had a mandate from the people of Alberta that said we want to be free of that. Free of confederation, then absolutely the moral thing to do would be to unilaterally declare independence. I just think that we'd have to take that path first before we would have the moral authority to unilaterally declare independence. And I'm
I'm not sure I agree with you there, Chris, because I agree with the basic premise, but in terms of whether or not we have that moral authority, again, in my research, I've discovered that we already have the moral authority. And this is in an ancient doctrine. And actually, I've written about this, and people who follow my podcast, which Kerry was kind enough to mention, I have a commentary coming out tomorrow about this concept. It's called the doctrine of the lesser magistrate. I just want to share with you a little snippet of what this is about, because, you know, Chris, you and I and Kerry, we've been at these APP meetings, and people are always asking, okay, well, you know, we want to do something about peaceful to defy government tyranny. What can we do? What can we do? Yeah. Well, I think I found the answer, and it's in the ancients. So here's the idea. You begin with the premise that I mentioned earlier, that all human authority is delegated authority, right? Because it comes from a higher source. God is the king of the kingdom, right? So what he's done is he's called us to work. He's instituted marriage and family. He's made nations. He's ordained national governments, and he's allowed the church to flourish. So to each of these institutions, he's delegated authority in their own sphere or realm. But human authority is limited. And this is where this part of it is really important. So the basic principle here that I'm talking about is, if you think of, for example, so I'm just going to pull this up here. The basic principle is, when the state commands that which God forbids, or forbids that which God commands, men have a duty to obey God rather than men. In other words, we have a duty to disobey the state. Well, how do we do that? Well, here's an example. How about Chris Scott? Okay. He had a choice to obey his conscience or to obey the dictates of an oppressive government. Now, that entailed a price. He had to pay a price for that, and he did. Think of the pastors, people like Pastor James Coates. They had to pay a price, but they had a choice. Were they going to follow what they believe was right in terms of their duty to God, to keep their churches open and to keep preaching to people, or were they going to just knuckle under to the state? So what this doctrine of the lesser magistrate does is it recognizes that actually the authority is not in government. When government uses authority in a way that is immoral, to use your word, Chris, we don't only have a right to disobey that law, but we have a duty to do it. And the problem is that not enough of us realize that we actually have this power. But I can prove to the people listening to this and watching this that what I'm saying is true. If you ask the question, why is the Trudeau government passing so many laws that are restricting almost everything we can do in every aspect of our lives? And if you want to know the answer to that, take a look at Justin Trudeau trying to get out of his car somewhere in Canada. Look at the size of his entourage. This is so bad, folks, that they actually have to send dummy cars. They send 2 or 3 cars to every event that he's speaking at, because one car gets pelted with tomatoes and whatever gets harassed, and they have to sneak them around. This government is so afraid of us because they know they actually don't have the power. They really don't have the power. Now, if we would exercise our moral authority to disobey these unjust laws, all of it would change. And here's a quotation from Thomas Jefferson. He says, if a law is unjust, a man or a woman is not only right to disobey it, but he's obligated to do so. So Chris is right, when he says that, these rights, even a Bill of Rights, is really just, words on a piece of paper. That Bill of Rights is only going to be meaningful to the extent that the people who are governed, who have that statute, okay, in this case, Albertans, to the extent that we believe in those rights, that we uphold them, that we're willing to fight for them, perhaps even die for them, it's only to that extent that the words on that page are going to be meaningful. And, if people are interested, they should go and look at what happened to the 56 brave men who signed the American Declaration of Independence that we were talking about. It ended badly for nearly all of them. Many of them were murdered. Their homes were burned to the ground. They were captured and imprisoned. Many of them lost everything, lost their families were killed. It was a very dangerous thing to do, but we must do it. If we believe in freedom, we can't keep looking at governments to say, oh, I have rights, leave me alone. At a certain point, we have to do what Chris says, and that is we have to say, look, we are the lesser magistrates. We're not the high authority. We're not the prime minister. We're not the president, but we have an authority. Maybe you're a police officer. Maybe you're a teacher. Maybe you're a business owner. Maybe you're a loudmouth lawyer. Whatever authority that you have, you're a lesser magistrate, but you have a duty to uphold what you know to be right, what you know to be moral. And that's what I would encourage people listening to this to really think about, because that's the problem. When you go look on social media, everybody's complaining, government, leave me alone. I have rights. Yeah. Okay, you have rights, but in order for them to be meaningful, you have to be willing to stand up for them.
And you have to be willing to submit to the consequence, because there sometimes is a consequence. Yes. And that it's a scary thing to stare down the long arm of the government and know that something is gonna happen to you that you're probably not gonna
would know. You would know.
These are well, and for me it was a very minor thing, a short imprisonment, some court crap, but court was kind of fun because I made new friends. Some people, Leighton, like you mentioned, those 56 brave men in the United States, that was a terrifying thing for them to do. And if they hadn't have done it, where would the United States be right now?
Well, I'm sure it was terrifying for you too, Chris. You shouldn't downplay it. How many business owners did what you did? Not many. Someone like another one of my clients, I'll give him a shout out, Jesse Johnson with All Papers Pizza. Someone like Ty Northcott. What if we would have had more people like Chris, more people like Jesse, more people
we
like
say
Ty,
that all the time.
Would have changed everything. Would have changed everything, wouldn't it? And you know what? We do have more people. People are braver than they know. They are. They're braver than they know. But they have to be inspired. They have to be empowered. And this is part of how the psychology of totalitarianism, disempowers people. It makes people feel like they're small and they're insignificant, and that they're just going to get crushed by courts or by police or by whoever. And folks, it's not true. Chris fought the law. Look, he's still here. And I dare say, I can't speak for you, Chris, but you probably don't regret a single thing that you did. And none of as I talked to the people I represented, in terms of standing up, you probably don't regret any of it. Maybe I'm wrong, but
I regret one thing, Leighton. I regret signing those bail conditions.
Yes, you do.
That my lawyer told me I should sign to get out of jail. I should have never done it.
So and if it had dragged lawyers, they ruin everything.
I would turn myself in and I would say, no, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to break all these laws.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's all I regret.
You know what? And you're right. You talk about lawyers. I have to say here, bare my soul a bit. I'm ashamed of the way our profession behaved. I mean, I think we weren't alone, but when I look at the medical profession, when I look at our judiciary, I look at the legal profession, I look at the church, I look at our elected officials. I mean, my God, we just let everybody down. And the worst part of it is that the worst COVID villains, people like Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan, are now trying to push all of this down the memory hole and tell us that it never happened, or that they didn't know any better, that they didn't know. Could you believe that she's saying, "Oh, we didn't know COVID-19 was a respiratory disease that only affected old people"? Come on, man. But this is what we're dealing with. They psyched this out before, and they're going to try and do it again. Sorry, we've drifted off into COVID here, guys. I know you want to talk about the Bill of Rights,
and really,
in a real sense, we are talking about it, though, aren't we?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And this is
great never happened.
I mean, yeah. I mean, that's the thing that kind of woke us up as to what's going on. So, I'm just going to kind of put us back on track now. So
Sure.
what is the next phase? Because Daniel Smith said last night that the Bill of Rights was going to be in the legislature sometime in the fall, as well as a bunch of other bills that she talked about. But essentially, have you guys presented your perfect Bill of Rights per se? And now they digest it, and then they pick away at it, and then they bring it into the legislature. Is that the process?
By and large, that's accurate. And, some people have gotten their noses out of joint saying, oh, why wasn't there a public consultative process? And I tell them, yeah, actually there was. We did it for 2 years. It was called the Alberta Prosperity Project.
Yeah, that's
because
true.
you guys know at every single one of these meetings, we talked about this stuff.
Yeah.
We've had stuff published on the website since forever. And so there was a consultative process. But the truth is, there were a group of really fine men who are from Danielle Smith's home constituency in Medicine Hat, Lethbridge area there. They're called the Black Hats. And these guys are very sincere, very dedicated. And they found out about some of the work that I was doing with the Alberta Prosperity Project. I was introduced to them by Mitch Sylvester, who is a man that you'll know. And Dennis Mojer was brought in to consult as well. But they wanted me to, they had sort of a brainstorming list of things, a wish list. What they wanted me to do is they wanted to take all that and make it look like a legal document, like an actual Bill of Rights. So that was really my role. I was able to take a lot of the sort of material that they had put together and then blend that with the work that I had already been doing. And the net result was we were able to come up with a Bill of Rights that had 22 essential rights. The version that the Premier is talking about during her town hall meetings, I attended one of them in Bonnyville here a couple of weeks ago. She's talking about 15 essential rights, but they include things like the one that we submitted included freedom of religion, belief, and conscience, the right to life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness, freedom of speech, expression, and from private or public censorship in any form. That's really important in terms of social media. Parents, parental rights, freedom of parents to make decisions concerning the health, education, welfare, and upbringing of their children. The right to keep and bear arms, including ownership and use of firearms. Freedom to keep and own private property, including land, livestock, and chattels. We haven't talked about farmers yet, but that's a key one.
That's right.
Freedom from supervision, surveillance, and unreasonable search and seizure. Very, very key. Freedom of mobility. Freedom to remain silent when being questioned. Here's a key one. The freedom of informed consent and to make personal health decisions, including to refuse vaccinations, medical or surgical procedures. That is one that we know is going to be in there based on what the Premier has been saying publicly. So that's really important. That's a key one. So really there's a lot of really, really good news in terms of this Bill of Rights. I think that we have to give a lot of credit to the Premier and Mickey Amery, the Minister of Justice, that they are making this Bill of Rights a priority. And honestly, you could argue, well, they don't have a choice because the grassroots people are really pushing for it. But I think the fact that this Bill of Rights, they didn't have to do the Bill of Rights. Other provinces aren't doing this. So I think this is very key, and I think the Premier needs to be commended for doing it. That she's made it a priority, and I included that Mr. Emery, the Minister of Justice. And what's great about this consultative process that we've had with them, we've met with several times with Jason Steffen, who's just an excellent MLA from Red Deer. You probably know him, Chris. Wonderful guy. And what's impressed me so much is how receptive they have been and how they've listened. They really want to know. They really wanted to know what we thought, representing Albertans, let's say grassroots Albertans, what we thought about these rights. And I dare say that the ones that we came up with and the ones that we submitted, I think would represent. I think most people reading what we submitted would say, yeah, they got most of it. Most of what I would have submitted, I think they got it. There's even another one that we've included. You guys have probably had Brett Oland on your show. We even included freedom of access to financial services, to goods and services, and to conduct commerce via bills of exchange, because there's a lot of fear about digital currency. So you can see in those 22, and the last one was kind of a throwaway, the right of official languages. But I mean, in those 22, we really cut through a very broad section of what we think Albertans would really want to have in their Bill of Rights. And the other thing that we did, and I alluded to this earlier, we really tried very hard to be as specific as possible in the way that we describe the rights. And the reason why is I was looking at this from sort of reverse engineering this, looking at it through the eyes of a judge. It's a lot easier for a judge to pick apart something like freedom of religion or freedom of expression, just baldly. And it's more difficult when the more defined and specific the wording of that right is, or freedom, the more difficult it is, the less discretion a judge is going to have in terms of violating it. And by the way, there is absolutely no equivalent of Section 1 of the Charter in this Bill of Rights.
Well, that's good.
Absolutely not. So there's no residual discretion in a judge to say to the government, you guys can violate this all you want because we're going to save it. There's no provision like that. The other thing that we included in here that I think would be of interest to your viewers and listeners is we did something kind of novel, at least in Alberta terms, and that is where an individual right or freedom is violated. Someone like Chris, think of his situation with the Whistle Stop Cafe, can actually initiate a complaint directly to government about his rights being violated, and can cause an inquiry to incur into that, to be brought into that. That's something that doesn't exist right now, but it fundamentally recognizes the power of the individual, the sanctity of the individual, and that really the government is the servant of the individual and not the other way around. So we tried to be as creative as possible here. And as I said, to try and reflect the unique culture of Alberta in this Bill of Rights. And that's part of the answer to the question, well, why have an Alberta Bill of Rights versus the Charter? Well, it's because in Alberta, we have a unique culture. Yeah. And if you don't know that yet, it's because you haven't learned enough about Alberta. The more you learn about Alberta, the more you realize that we really do have a unique culture. And I think the most beautiful culture of any place anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
I have two questions, and I forgot the second one, but the first one is, why is it that we have freedom of thought, religion, and expression, but not freedom of speech?
In terms of the way we worded it?
Right, because they're two distinctly different things, right?
Well, we do have freedom of the way we've worded it. We have freedom of speech, expression, and from private or public censorship in any form. So,
in the proposed Bill of Rights,
that's what we have. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
But you've got what you're talking about is freedom of expression, and you raise a good point. Speech is not specifically mentioned, although the way that the Charter and other bills of rights like it have been interpreted, expression is intended to be a broader term that includes not just speech, but things could be, for example, things like artwork, things could be like film or literature or things of that nature that are not strictly speaking a speech, but are forms of free expression that we've recognized in our culture and in our history. So that's probably why speech is not recognized specifically, although as you can see, we think it should be. We quite agree with you. The problem with
it should be,
yes, absolutely. I mean, it was famously stated that the freedom of speech might be the most important right of all, that freedom, because it's the one freedom you can exercise to win back all of the others. And so I quite agree with you, and that's why we use the word speech specifically in this Alberta Bill of Rights. And I pray that that doesn't change when the monkeys at the typewriters in the bowels of the legislature get at this thing. We haven't seen their version yet.
That's super important because I'm interested to see that. But this is really important, folks, because right now, if you look at what the federal government is doing, they literally are making it illegal for you to say things.
Mm-hmm.
And in my mind, I don't agree with hate speech. I don't think people should say hurtful things to each other. But at the end of the day, there's hate speech there's either free speech or not free speech. And you can't have both. Right.
Yeah.
So if we're telling people they can't say something, like, since when should it ever be a law that you can't hate someone? I mean, that's a personal thing. It's between you and God. And I don't agree that people should hate each other at all. But who are we to put laws around people's hearts and minds, right? It doesn't make any sense. So I'm glad that that's in there.
You make a really important point. There was a giant of English literature. His name is John Milton. He wrote famous poems called Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained. He also wrote a very important political tract called Areopagitica, which was published in 1651 in England. And in it, he said essentially what Chris just said. He said, actually, the only type of speech which needs legal protection is that which could offend. And just to take that one step further, I heard Dr. Jordan Peterson talking about this one time, and he said, if we can only have conversations, if we can only communicate in ways that avoid offending each other, we really can never have any kind of meaningful conversation.
That's right. Yeah.
We'll have to get the fourth volume of Newspeak delivered to the doorstep, so we know what to say and how to respond.
Well, it's already happening. There are already some of these speech police coming to the door and knocking on people's doors and saying, "Oh, you posted something on social media," and so sadly, it's already here. And I can tell you some of the data from England. England has had these types of laws in the books for many years now. In 2018, they had almost 3,400 convictions in that country for this type of speech, and they included things like there was a girl, a young girl who her friend, who happened to be a black young man, he committed suicide, and she posted a tribute to him on, I believe it was Facebook or some other social media format, and she included verbatim the lyrics of his favorite rap song. So naturally, because it's a rap song, it had the N-word in it.
Yeah.
And so all she did is reproduce those lyrics verbatim. And bear in mind, this was a loving tribute from a white girl to a black man. And she was convicted. And she's a criminal now under English law, under the hate speech laws. So that's just an example of how this can be perverted. I think where we're going to see these hate speech laws in Canada applied most severely, and this is a prediction, I may be wrong in this, I hope I am, but I think that the Trudeau Liberals are going to use hate speech laws in order to attack Mr. Poilievre as a type of a lawfare attack. I think that's what we're going to see. And I think they would have done that in the United States, except they can't because the First Amendment is so airtight there. But they would have loved to prosecute Donald. Could you imagine if they could have prosecuted Donald Trump for hate speech?
Yeah.
But they will be able to do it under Canadian law against Pierre Poilievre. And these Liberals, wow, as desperate as they are right now, I mean, I think they're capable of anything in terms of trying to win this next election when you look at their plummeting popularity.
Yeah.
There'd be a lot of us in jail.
Yes, you and I could maybe share a cell.
Yeah, probably.
Definitely censorship. I was going to mention
at least you could write songs, Chris. Maybe you could make a lot of money.
Well, he could rap out a beat back there. He's got the drums set up.
Yeah. They'd already be in jail, so I can say whatever I want about our glorious prime minister.
So I did want to at least address one big discussion that was at the town hall last night. Of course,
Sure.
Danielle took probably 2.5 hours of really intense questions, and she actually did a really good job. I think she did. More on that some other time. But some of the big issues out were about carbon tax, or even just taxation in general, pension, what's happening with the energy sector, and CO2, and of course federal overreach. But one of the big ones was about vaccine mandates, and I know in the Bill of Rights, you have something about medical. Maybe you can explain what is actually in there.
Yeah. So this goes back to the AGM of the party that happened last November.
Yeah.
And there were a series of resolutions. You guys probably know this. You were probably there.
Yeah.
And one of them that was adopted, I helped to write it, had to do with a resolution that would protect essentially the integrity of the human body. Because open season was declared on it during COVID with the Kenny vaccine mandates, and of course, that you guys might disagree with this, but I think when Jason Kenney imposed that vaccine mandate program, that the vaccine passport program in Alberta, that was the point of no return. That finished him. I don't think Albertans could ever forgive him for that. And so what we've done here is. We've included in this bill freedom of informed consent. That's very important because you think of it, really nobody who was exposed to this vaccine, whether they took it or not, ever had informed consent about how hazardous these drugs are. And you probably had Dr. William Mackis on to talk about that, or to make personal health decisions. So essentially what this new bill, if they adopted our wording, would say is that the government cannot invade into the privacy of individuals in terms of their personal health decisions. And that, if that is upheld, that also would shut out all of the corporations and all of the other people who did it, right? Because a lot of these, of course, were corporate policies, but they were all marching in lockstep with government. That's their story. Yeah. So we'd be able to refuse vaccinations, medical or surgical procedures. So this is extremely important because it recognizes the fundamental protections, what is said in the Nuremberg Code about this doctrine of informed consent. And that really the state cannot require people, to put things into their bodies as a condition of being able to participate in civil society. And this is the crux of the class action suits that you mentioned earlier. Yeah. One of them that we're doing is on behalf of the unvaccinated, because of all the things that Trudeau did, because Trudeau and Kenney and people like them essentially made the taking of the vaccines a condition of participating in society. You couldn't travel, you couldn't go watch your kids play hockey, you couldn't go to the grocery store. You couldn't get on a plane or a train or a ship in this country. Very, very severe restrictions. And of course, now we know in hindsight, it was all a complete delusion. It was all a psyop. And then the other part of it, the other action that we're doing is we're bringing this action on behalf of people who are vaccine injured. So there's a class action that we're doing, and our good friend Jeffrey Rath has another action that he's doing as well with Eva Chipiuk.
Mm-hmm. So
that part of it where we have the right to informed consent, that actually piggybacks off of the property rights. Because if you think about it, the first piece of property we ever own is our own body.
Yeah.
And the government basically took control over that property and told us what we could do with it, and told us how we had to treat other people during that time, right? So
this is actually a very astute point that you make, Chris, and it's one that a lot of people miss. People say, oh, well, there's no recognition of personal property in Canadian law. Really? I tell them, look at the criminal code. Okay. Look at the offenses. Okay. What are Tamara Leach and Chris Barber and those people charged with? Well, mischief. Well, what's mischief? Well, it's interference with property, private property, public. There's a separate offense for public mischief, by the way. What's another offense? Well, let's see. Theft. What is theft? Well, theft is when you take somebody else's property, and you convert it to your own use. Well, what's robbery? Well, in the government's case, it's taxation, but robbery is when you combine the offense of assault, which is interference with somebody else's body, and then you combine that with theft. That's what robbery is. Break and enter. What's fraud? These are all related, even all the way up to murder. Because murder, what our homicide law says under the criminal code is not that we have the right to life. It's that we cannot be illegally killed. and which is another way of saying that we can't have our right to life interfered with by someone else unlawfully. So as you rightly point out, that's basically putting, you know, a property right on the human body. And so we have, again, the federal government is lying to us. We have personal property recognized all the way through. And I mean, that's just the criminal law, never mind everything else. But just the criminal law, the whole concept of our criminal law, the way it's structured, is based upon a theory, a fundamental theory and a philosophy of the sanctity of personal property. You cannot escape it. It's in almost every single provision that's in the criminal code. And so that's the truth about it. But you know, if people are going to accept lies, you know, if they're going to live by lies, you know, then unfortunately, their ignorance of the law and their ignorance of their rights is not going to offer them any defense.
For those of you that are wondering why property rights aren't in the charter itself, in the one of the revisions, they were. And if you want to find out more about that and why they were dropped, you can go and go check out Brian Peckford's blog, the Honorable Brian Peckford, the last living signatory of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. He speaks about that. He's got some great insight into it, and it's a really interesting story.
Well, there's just no doubt that Trudeau was a dyed-in-the-wool communist. He's a card-carrying communist.
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't even allowed to teach in this country between 1952 and 1960, when Canada was going through its own McCarthy period. But he held his $5 a year membership in the International Communist Party till the day he died. He was part of the Club of Rome. He was a friend to Mao. He was a friend to Castro. You know, that's why he was one of the architects of the charter. He gets too much credit for the charter, but in the eyes of Brian Peckford. But you know, there's no doubt that part of the purpose of the charter, from Pierre Trudeau's point of view, was to disenfranchise Canadians, so that we would not be able to keep and hold private property, because the ability to keep and hold private property is inextricably linked to freedom and prosperity. There's no society in which people cannot keep and hold private property where they have any measure of freedom. That does not exist today. It has never existed ever.
What about in Soviet Russia? 35,
oh, they had a beautiful constitution.
They were
very beautifully written. You go look at it, but no access to courts. You know, they had the gulags. And unfortunately, it seems as though countries like Canada and even the United States, Great Britain, are drifting that way. I'm optimistic. I don't think that we're going to get there. I think that I have a lot of faith in Canadians, especially in Albertans, and I think Alberta can be. And this is one of the things that we said to Mr. Amory and his staff, and to Jason Steffen and to the Premier, is that, look, Alberta has the ability to be a leader in this sphere. Nobody else in Canada is doing this. No one else in Canada is rethinking individual rights and freedoms. And this is really, really vitally important. And I hope people who are listening to this or hearing this will get involved and contact their MLAs. And we'll write letters, and we'll engage in social media, and really get involved with this project, because over the next 85 days before this bill drops in the legislature, there's going to be a period of consultation where you'll be able to have your say. You know, the Premier cares so much about what people think. She's traveling all over the province doing town hall meetings. She doesn't have to do that. Like Kerry was saying, she doesn't have to go travel around the province and field these tough questions. Justin Trudeau sure as heck isn't doing that. Wab Canoe isn't doing that. Mr. Ebby in BC isn't doing that. Mr. Moe in Saskatchewan isn't doing that. Our Premier is doing that. And it's not easy to go up in front of hundreds of people and ask and answer these tough questions.
And she's getting immediate feedback. That's what happened last night.
Right.
And in some cases, I think she was visibly taken aback by some of the comments that were basically shouted out from the crowd. But that's what you need, because that is how this all changes. Because if all you're doing is getting filtered through a staffer that says, "Oh yeah, well we went there and this ended up happening," it's not the same as if it was actually happening in your face.
Yeah. People talk about how smart the premier is, and she is. Yeah. She's a very intelligent lady. But the two things that don't get talked about enough that really impressed me about her, and I'm not here to plug her. I'm not on her staff. Yeah. She's not sending me flowers and Girl Guide cookies. Yeah. But she listens and she cares. What other politician, what other leader at her level in this country or of any country can you say that about? Certainly can't.
I hear Trudeau talking about the Liberal Party is listening to Canadians all the time.
Which Canadians?
Which Canadians?
Which Canadians?
His neighbors.
Mr. Singh, I think.
The 3,000 Gosens that he just took in. Is he listening to them? He's not listening to you and me. And his town hall meetings are an absolute joke. They look like they're infomercials. People standing, standing dumbstruck, just looking around like, when's it going to be over? What the hell is he saying? Yeah. But no, I mean, listen, I encourage people, get excited about this rights project. We're only going to get one shot at this. This is going to be your Bill of Rights. There is going to be an Alberta Bill of Rights. Of that, there's no doubt. The Premier would not be going around telling everybody there's going to be a Bill of Rights if there's not going to be one.
That's right.
If you want to have a say in what's in it, get out to these town hall meetings. Contact your MLA. Get involved. Engage with the leaders on social media. Tell them what you think about what needs to be in there. If you're really, bullish on the right to keep and bear arms, like Chris is, tell them that, so they'll put that in there. Because if they have a strong indication from the public that that's what they want in there, I dare say they're going to put it in. They're listening to us, and I'm sure that they'll listen to you if you want to get involved and you want to find out what this Bill of Rights is all about. The government is going around. Our premier is going around the province listening to you. She's telling you about the Bill of Rights because she wants to get your feedback on it. She's trying to gauge your interest in it. She's trying to gauge how important you think this is. So, what I'd say to people is, hey, get involved. This is not a closed process like it was under Mr. Kenney.
Absolutely. Michelle did ask.
Consistent. Oh, yeah, go ahead,
I was just going to say, Michelle asked, was last night's town hall meeting recorded? It was, and I know there were some people that were watching it online. I know it will be presented at some point verbatim, so it's not like it'll be censored. But again, we always mention the amazing work that our good buddy Max does at freedomcalendar.net. And he actually does have the events listed here. So there's
fantastic.
In Calgary, we got the Better Calgary Party coming up. We also have the virtual town hall with Daniel Smith tomorrow in Edmonton. And just go on there and you'll find out all the events that are happening. You can also look at by location. If you're looking in Edmonton or in Grand Prairie, look under location and it'll tell you what's going on there too. So kudos to Max. Thanks so much for doing that.
That's great. One of my fellow podcasters, Marty up north. He actually he put out a very nice summary, sort of highlights on his X page of some of the questions and answers that came up. So you might want to check that out. It's called Marty up north. Really great podcaster, Alberta podcaster, and
he's been on here, and I shook hands with him last night and last week at another event, the I Am Albertan event. So he's everywhere, and
I met him in Victoria.
What's that? And you met him in Victoria.
Yeah.
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was supposed to be at that event. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it. So, but I heard it was a really great experience there.
Yeah, we were supposed to carpool, Leighton.
I thought we were going to get in your plane.
Well, imagine the conversation that would have been.
I don't get a word in edgewise when I'm with Chris. He just goes on and on.
Speaking of which, I got more to say.
Two last questions anyways that I want to do, if that's all right, Chris. Number one is, so the Bill of Rights again, so that'll go through the legislature, or at least will it be presented to us first as Albertans? And maybe we can't even do anything at that point. Here it is. that's what we're going to do.
Great question. Great
Yeah.
question.
Okay.
By the time over the next 85 days, that's when people have the chance to have their input.
Okay.
Once it's introduced in the legislature, that consultative process is really over.
Yeah.
So that's why I encourage anybody who's listening or watching this, get involved now. If you want to, if you know, get involved now. Get out to one of these town hall meetings. Participate. That's how you're going to get. That's how you're going to get your licks in if you want to get involved in this process. And it is very important that people who are interested in this get involved, because, as I said earlier, we only get one chance at this. Yeah. This is the first renovation of our Bill of Rights we've had in 53 years. So, you know, we're probably not going to be around the next time. So let's get this right. And, you know, if you don't get involved and have your voice in there, then you won't have anything to complain about, because when it drops in the fall in the legislature, you know, then the bill will basically be in the form that it's going to be when it's passed. But there is going to be, make no mistake, there will be a new Bill of Rights for Alberta. Okay. Of that, there's no question.
Excellent. And so then the last portion was that about vaccination, and of course you're doing the class action.
Yeah.
What is the status of that, and how do people get involved?
Well, the best way to get involved, if you are one of the vaccine injured, is to visit our website. We have a newsletter with information about that. It's entering right now what's called the certification process. So it's early days. So there's a lot of time to get involved for people who want to. If you are an unvaccinated person and you want to get involved in that class action, same idea. We have a separate newsletter on there. We also have a lot of really current information about things that are happening is sort of in the COVID law world. But you know, there's a lot of really good information out there. We try to compile all of it into our newsletter. And if you have questions, you can also email us. We do our best to correspond with people and answer their questions. And if we can't help them, we try and direct them into another lane.
Okay. Good. Well, then that's really all I had to ask about today. I mean, yeah, we could easily talk about the individual pieces of the Bill of Rights, but I'm anxious to see exactly what's going to happen with it, and when it will be presented and how it will be presented. So obviously there's a process that's going to happen with that. And they actually don't go back to the ledge until I think it's like a week before the AGM. Like I think it's like October 26th or something.
Yeah, we have a long break. And so this is the opportunity, right? Yeah. This is the opportunity for people. And I really encourage them to get involved, contact your MLAs and get out to these town hall meetings. You know, email Mr. Amory's office. They're working on this. Jason Steffen is also working on this. He's very important in terms of being on the Premier's team and crafting legislation. Jason is actually a very experienced lawyer. He's a tax lawyer. And so he's very involved in creating legislation for the government. He's part of one of the people who oversees that as a quote unquote legal expert. So he's another person that you can contact. I found him to be a real gentleman, very receptive, really listens well, and you know, cares a lot about Albertans. That was my clear impression of him.
Marie was just asking about, so glad I tuned in, didn't know anything about the town hall meetings. When did they come to Central Alberta? Again, go on to freedomcalendar.net and you can probably find what's happening. I believe tonight she was in High River, and I think next week, I could be wrong, she's in Olds. And of course, you know, the calendar is out. So I know if it's not officially on the freedomcalendar.net, then get a hold of your local UCP constituency association, and they'll tell you when and where it'll be. It might not be, say, in Sundre Three Hills. It might be somewhere else that might be right next to you. So you might have to drive for half an hour or an hour, but I think it's well worth it. I'm glad I went to that. There was lots of things going on last night, and again, it's get involved. Like last night, I could have gone to my my MLA, who's an NDPer, had his town hall. So wouldn't that have been good if me going there with my Alberta shirt on?
That would have been great.
And then they also had a Better Calgary event up in my ward. So that was another thing I could have gone. But yeah, we're starting to get back into the fall, even though it is July 31st, and events will be happening. So we're going to be posting stuff again on the albertaprosperityproject.com, as well as just check it out on freedomcalendar.net. And I'm not sure, Chris, do you have anything planned at the Whistle Stop coming up?
Do I?
Yeah.
You probably would know better than me. I'm stuck in the kitchen every day.
No, we're not. We don't officially have anything planned, and we probably won't for the next little while, anyways. I know right now the I Am Albertan group is looking at doing an event for Alberta Day, which is Sunday, September 1st, and so we'll find out, and we'll definitely post that information as it comes forward too. So.
I didn't know. Thanks for mentioning that. I didn't know about Alberta Day. That sounds great.
Yeah. And it was something that was actually, I mean, obviously 1905 is when we were founded, September 1st, 1905. Yeah. And for the most part, it's always been Arbor Day, Labor Day, that sort of thing. But especially in the last 2 years, I think it's fallen on a weekend. And so this weekend, or this one for sure, being a Sunday, yeah, we should have a lot of people out there.
We should celebrate our province and our culture. Maybe
absolutely.
Tristan put on another big concert there, like he did over the July long weekend.
Oh boy, the bureaucratic red tape to do that is frustrating.
Yeah. Again, it's one of those things where if you're not involved with it, you got to submit. You got to submit forms. You got to submit permits. You got to put out a map of how the area is going to be laid out. You have to
send out letters to everybody in a 1 mile radius.
Within a one, yeah, I know, yeah. And
it's easier just to set up like a drive-in movie theater on the roof of your restaurant.
It is, absolutely.
Well, technically, I was supposed to do that. Yeah. You know what they say about permission and forgiveness.
Yes,
I do want to get back to what we were talking about earlier, because the consistent theme, or it's bouncing around in my head this entire time, is all paths lead to Alberta independence.
Yeah,
so many things we've talked about here today, things that Albertans want, whether they know it or not, can only be achieved through Alberta independence. Mm-hmm. Leighton, you mentioned that in the Alberta Bill of Rights, Albertans want to be able to use fiat currency. We want to be able to use bills of exchange instead of digital currency. The only way we can do that in this province is if we're independent. We cannot do it as a province because we're constitutionally bound to use the currency that the federal government tells us to use.
Mm-hmm.
Connie mentions that she wants our politicians to say that they want to withdraw from NATO or the WHO. Well, guess what? We're constitutionally bound to follow the federal government in any matters dealing with any international relations.
Yeah.
It's not in our wheelhouse. There are so many things here that we can only accomplish through independence. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. The Alberta Prosperity Project, Leighton, you mentioned that when things get better, the appetite for independence, it wanes a little bit, right? When we're having problems, then of course people are hungry for a solution. APP still has the only solution that's tangible, that deals with all these problems. We have all sorts of groups out there that are doing other things, holding politicians accountable, getting board of directors changed out in political parties, all good and important things. But at the end of the day, the only lasting and complete solution is taking back our sovereignty. And this is right down to the individual. The only solution when dealing with a tyrannical government is exercising your sovereignty and submitting to the consequences. If Albertans want these things, if you don't want to be bound by World Health Organization mandates or World Economic Forum dictates, then I guess you should probably get involved with the Alberta Prosperity Project, start sharing the information, and get back on track to that referendum. If we don't do it, we're not going to get all these things we want. Right? So all paths lead to Alberta independence.
Yeah. Shelley has asked the same question over and over, and my apologies, Shelley. I did star you, and
you were censoring her.
I know I was not. Come on, guys. No one's talking about censorship. What is the remedy? And the initial question was this one. Sorry. How does the Bill of Rights address censorship? Citizens cannot make an informed decision when when information is censored and suppressed. Example, lipid nanoparticle traveling through the entire body, including major organs and that. So, and I agree, like a lot of even some of the stuff that was brought up last night at the town hall brought up, she had stats. Danielle had stats in a book, and it was basically like, and I'm kind of making this up a little bit, but 6% of 1 to 4 year olds were getting vaccinated for COVID. And then another 6% between 5 and 8 and or 7 or whatever. So what the big concern was is that we're not getting through to those 6 or 7% of people, because,
and we never will.
That's really what it came down to, is that we can try and we're trying to educate people through our platform here. We're trying to get out, but the mainstream media is still on this narrative, and there are people that, no matter, even if you read a form to them before they were going to vaccinate their kids or before they're going to inject it into themselves, they're not going to care. They're just going to go, my aunt did it, my dad did it, everything is good, so I'm just going to go ahead and do it. And I think that is the biggest concern. So in terms of censorship, we need something to happen with mainstream media, and with Pierre basically saying that he wants to defund the CBC. Great idea, and I think it will certainly help, but we still have other groups out there that are still going to be doing their own news reporting, big mainstream media that is getting some sort of government grant in order to go on their narrative, right? And
well, how about we support individuals and organizations that are doing these things?
That is very true.
How many mainstream organizations deal with the topics that we deal with? Yeah. Right? That's how you deal with censorship, is you vote with your wallet. You stop engaging with organizations that are feeding you BS, and you support the people that are trying to get the right information out there, whether it's the Alberta Prosperity Project or independent journalists or whatever. That's the way you fight that. And not only that, but you have a plan so that if say one day the Liberal government does something super crazy, like say, well, we're going to put these set of laws around the internet, and you can only say certain things, and if you say the wrong thing, we're going to put you in jail, even if we think you're going to say the wrong thing. Imagine we live in that crazy world, and we can no longer do these shows. What are you going to do then? Are you going to just sit on your laurels and say, oh, well, we need a politician or the government to save us? Or are you going to start writing pamphlets and handing them out like they did in Poland? There's always a way to fight censorship, and it all comes down to what I said before: taking back our sovereignty as individuals and groups and doing it ourselves.
There is a protection in what we submitted to the government, a protection from private or public censorship in any form. And then we've also included freedom from supervision, surveillance, and unreasonable search and seizure. Because, of course, a lot of what happens from censorship comes at us through surveillance and supervision of our online accounts and things like that, and also seizure of private accounts, private information. So there are teeth in what we propose to government. I don't know yet whether that's going to be included. One other thing I didn't mention that the government has already sort of done through the Elections Act is we put in here freedom to democratically elect and recall legislators by voting through secret paper ballots to be manually hand counted. So there's a lot in there, but essentially what it means is that the NDP wouldn't be able to vote using, or wouldn't be able to cheat using voting machines. That's right. So that's the other one I didn't mention that was really important. The other one, and this speaks to Chris's original point when we started off, freedom to use sufficient force to defend person, family, house, and property from any and all occupation, theft, or destruction. That's a recognition of what's called the castle doctrine, the idea that your house is your home, your house is your castle, and that you can defend it. So there, again, I don't know if all of these are going to make it into the final product, but this is part of what we submitted to government.
I want to just bring up two of these points here. Connie asks, why does Daniel Smith put COVID shots on the childhood schedule? And of course, Shelley asks, citizens should know the shot is still experimental. So she did address this, and it's a double-edged sword. All the way through this, we're talking about being able to have freedom of choice, and you know, hey, I like drinking. I don't smoke. Someone probably does smoke here. Out of the three of us, maybe someone smokes, you know, and that is our freedom of choice to be able to do that. And the argument, of course, would be, yeah, but you're not sticking in something that is going to kill you. Well, essentially, alcohol would potentially kill you. Smoking will potentially kill you. So it really does come down to personal choice, and that's kind of how she said it. And again, I'm just the messenger, and right away people were like, well, wait a minute, that those arguments don't work, because this is you're giving it to a kid that maybe can't read or doesn't know the difference between smoking and drinking at that age. And I agree. So it is this very fine line that has to be walked and discussed.
Yeah, it is.
I
mean, there are
parents. Sorry, Leighton, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I'm going to touch on the point that you were saying, you were going to say, Chris, but correct me if I'm wrong. Part of the tension here is Danielle is saying that parents should not, their choices for their kids should not be restricted by government.
Mm-hmm.
And that's may sound like a bit of a cop-out. People will respond by saying, yeah, but parents shouldn't be able to give their kids noxious things. But of course, parents give their kids noxious things all the time. Some mothers aren't very good cooks, for example. Yeah. But you know, what Danielle is getting at here is it's very dangerous for a government to start wading into parental choice.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the things that's going on right now, and every parent needs to be alive to this, is the federal government, both in Canada and the United States, they want your kids. And this is an age-old battle. The federal government regards your kids as their kids. Okay. Yeah. This is why they're wading into daycare. This is why if you remember, the prime minister creepily, he kicked you out of the room so he could talk to your kid and tell them how they should get the vax. What Danielle is doing here is by preserving parental choice and parental authority, is she's recognizing that that's not an area where the government should be.
Yeah.
And so as much as people are right, these drugs should be banned because they're hazardous.
Mm-hmm.
To focus on this parental part of it, I think, is dangerous.
Yeah.
And I think I do think that these drugs should be made made illegal because they are hazardous. And I know that the government of Alberta is looking into that question very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I have to agree with the premier that, boy, we're going down a very dangerous road if the government were to come in and say, hey, parents, you can't give your kids this shot, because that's going down a road that I don't think her government wants to. Mm-hmm. In terms of, and this gets back to what I was saying to you earlier about the doctrine of the lesser magistrates. Mm-hmm. One of the areas of authority that needs to be respected is the family.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what she's trying to do. I think that's part of her answer. Anyway, sorry, Chris, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
You nailed it, Leighton. I was just about to say, what about the parents that feed their children nothing but McDonald's and let them eat all the candy they want? The list goes on and on and on. Parents have been messing up their children for years. And this is something that I had to really struggled with this as we went through the Million March for Children. We're watching how, the lunatic left, not even the lunatic left, I don't know how to describe it. These people who self-sterilize coming for our children and indoctrinating them into their ideology.
Yeah.
We watch this, and we watch videos of parents sitting in libraries with their children watching men dressed like women with their testicles hanging out, dancing in front of them. That's not okay to me. That is not okay to me. That would not be okay to me as a parent. And I would never expose my children to those types of things. However, those people would never expose their children to a Christian church because they believe it's evil and it's everything that's wrong with the world. And these are the choices that we make. And these are the freedoms that we have to allow each other. Now, if you want to change that and not have it happen in a public space, make it happen. Get involved, get on the board, do whatever you're going to do, and change society, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of the anger in the comments is directed at Danielle Smith. Well, can anybody tell me when Danielle Smith specifically wrote that in the childhood vaccination schedule? Or is it a bureaucratic juggernaut of Alberta Health Services that does the bidding of Big Pharma because they get heavy discounts on their drugs and can provide healthcare and access $23 billion of tax trough? This isn't a Danielle Smith thing. What Danielle Smith could do, and she is in the process of doing, is find out exactly what's going on with that, get recommendations from doctors and scientists all over the world, and then present the report so that they can do something about it, right?
Yeah.
So when
I know she's
you're
doing that. I know she for a fact
she is doing it.
Yeah.
The report is actually on her desk right now, as far as I know.
That's right. Yeah, she mentioned that last night. Dr. Gary Davidson was spearheading that, so that is
right.
Imminent. Yeah.
So,
and
the
that report
that people have needs to be channeled in the right places. I have a lot of reasons to be angry, and more reasons walk through the door of my restaurant every single day. People that come there still to this day and tell me about someone they lost from the jab, or a kid that has a disability now because of the jab, or something that happened over COVID, or a job they lost, or life destroyed every single day. And I am absolutely furious that these things happened. But as much as it irks me that the provincial government, the Danielle Smith government, is kind of, feels to me, hanging us business owners out to dry, fighting me in court over this class action lawsuit, trying to get out from remedying people, as much as that angers me, my anger, I have to channel that in the right place. And that's at the people that did this to us. Our governments they're just a bunch of puppets of the bureaucratic nightmare that's behind them. So we need to fix this, and the only way we're going to fix it is if we take these little wins, we support the good things we see happening, and we understand that it's not necessarily the person that's at the leader of the government or whatever that's responsible for these things happening. But we need to support what they're trying to do to fix them.
That's a really great point, Chris. And just to illustrate it, I mentioned earlier these black hat gentlemen.
Yeah.
These guys are not world renowned legal scholars. They're not billionaires. Okay, they're not fat cats like Mary Edwards. These are everyday Albertans like you, and they just decided that they were very concerned about the direction the province was going, and they figured out a plan to do something about it. And now they're just, like I said, regular Joes, really nice people, smart guys, like a lot of Albertans, pickup truck driving guys in black hats, and they are meeting with the Deputy Minister of Justice at the legislature, talking about a new Bill of Rights for Alberta. That's the power that Chris is talking about. That's the power that you have. So yeah, you can, if you want to rage on social media and criticize the Premier and rail at people like Kerry or Chris or me or whoever, or Elon Musk for all the good that's going to do, you could do that. Or you could do what these black hat guys did and actually figure out a plan to do something that is going to change lives. And you can do it. Everybody who is watching or listening to this has an important role to play, has important input that they can provide, whether it's in parental rights or the right to bear arms or some other right that lady asked about, censorship.
Yeah.
Get involved, advocate. You have the ability to do this in our country, and praise God that we still do.
Yeah.
You can make a difference in this. I don't want to sound like a commercial here, but these black hat guys proved it. They can do it.
They channeled their energy in the right direction. It's frustrating watching, during that time, we were so upset that politicians were pretending to be doctors. They're playing doctor and making these health decisions and stuff. We were so upset. And now, like, even the people that are on our side are expecting our politicians to do the same thing, just the other way. right? We can't have it both ways. We've already said there's work being done to deal with this issue. Danielle Smith or any other MLA, they are not doctors. They don't just sign and say, oh, you can't have this medical treatment. If they did that right now, the NDP would eat them alive.
Mm-hmm.
They would absolutely destroy them if they did that.
Mm-hmm.
However, if the Premier commissions a study and they bring a bunch of concrete evidence as to the dangers of this, which takes time, and they present that and they make that illegal or off of our schedules here in Alberta and Alberta Health completely, that's the way you can do it. And that's the effective way to do it. So just remember, 4 years ago, we were watching Jason Kenney giving us medical advice and we're pissed off about it. And now if you're asking for our current Premier to do the same thing, you're really no better than those who made this happen in the first place.
Mm-hmm. That's an excellent point.
That is a good point. Yeah. Well, we're at 2 hours. I think
is it supposed to be this long, or do we go over?
Oh, we can go for another hour. Anybody ready to go for another hour? I
was supposed to be off a half hour ago, but
okay. We're gonna wrap things up again. Not only thanks for the people that are watching and sticking around and being engaged. Thank you so much for the comments and the questions. But Leighton, thank you so much for coming on and all the work that you're doing with the Bill of Rights and just being who you are and just being a straight shooter, letting us know what is going on. And on behalf of all of us at APP, we thoroughly enjoy having you be part of that this community. And of course, Mr. Christopher Scott, thanks for making those amazing cinnamon buns and flipping those.
That I never bring you.
And thank you honestly, thank you for taking the time out. I know it's difficult for you to be doing, especially these things at night. And we've often talked about getting back and doing our Chris and Kerry show, and timing is just not really working out right now. But I thoroughly appreciate when you do take the time and your great insight and when I was teaching, just a little philosophy. When I was teaching, I found that when I was teaching multimedia, so I'm not a real teacher. I'm teaching multimedia. I would, could be that too, but I would learn so much from my students because they would show me shortcuts on how to do things or different ways to approach a graphic problem or something like that. And I think that's what Chris goes through on a daily basis is he hears from the patrons that are coming in and supporting his restaurant that he's hearing all these stories that we don't hear because we're in our own little bubbles. And right. Chris, you've got your own bubble going on at the Whistle Stop Cafe. So thank you again for taking the time out and letting us know what's going on there.
That's always my pleasure being
I really do
guys.
Yeah.
I miss doing this stuff. So
yeah,
it's nice to get on.
And I just pray to God that the Chris and Kerry show isn't like a Jerry Lewis, Dean Martin split. You guys aren't going to talk for 20 years.
Oh no. I
mean,
no.
we got to get the comedy team back together. Chris and Kerry, that's a classic. Okay.
Well, I'm working. I'm taking steps to get some time in my life to do some things because really, I actually feel like I'm the violinist on the Titanic, and the world, the Titanic's everything is just going down, and I'm like, the world's on fire, and I'm making
like this,
and I'm making cinnamon buns and making sure people can eat. So I'm working on it, but we'll see how it goes. Excellent.
Well, again, thank you so much for watching, and we do this every Wednesday, and I'm not going to go on any further because we're really right at 2 hours. But yes, we'll see you guys next Wednesday, and please share if you can. Amazing to have the guests that we're able to, and thank you for APP for letting us have this platform and educating you guys. And one last thing I do want to mention, and I put it in my notes so that I would not forget, a happy belated birthday to my younger daughter, Cassie, and good luck to my older daughter, Kiana, who starts her career as an optometrist tomorrow in Oregon. Much love and big hugs to both of you. So I had to put that in, otherwise I would just tear up and cry. So I'm not going to do it. And with that, all right, guys, thank you so much. And you guys take care, and we'll see you throughout the summer. Cheers.
Okay. God bless.
Thanks. Good night.